Today on the Happy Families podcast, an interview that I am more excited about than just about any conversation I've ever had on the podcast. We're going to talk to Emma McKeon. Emma is Australia's most decorated Olympic athlete ever, with 14 medals all up, 6 golds and a whole lot of silvers and bronze. Emma has competed at the Olympics in Rio, Tokyo and Paris, a bunch of Commonwealth Games as well. And she joins me today after retiring from Olympic and competitive swimming approximately 6 weeks ago to talk about parenting, kids in sports more generally, and all things swimming and achievement goal-oriented. Emma, thank you so much for being with me on the Happy Families podcast.
Thank you for having me.
You started swimming at a really young age. What kept you coming back to the pool when so many other kids were dropping out of sport? I mean, we know that there's a precipitous decline in kids staying in sport once they get into their teenage years, but you just kept going, even though you'd started young. What kept you coming back?
I definitely still had a lot of friends in there, even though there were a lot of friends that were dropping out. And I would also stop and start a lot. I quit, wasn't enjoying it, putting too much pressure on myself, all of that kind of thing. And I think what ended up with me coming back was my parents, because they were very relaxed about it all. They never pressured me either way to swim or not to swim or to achieve or perform or anything. They just wanted me to enjoy what I was doing and be happy in what I was doing, find something I was passionate about. So I think that's what brought me back all the time.
This is a really big deal, and I'm so glad that you brought your parents straight into it, because any parent who's listening to this conversation is going to be saying, oh, but I really want my kids to achieve. I want them to set goals. I want them to be not just competent, but I want them to excel somewhere. And as a parent, you sit there on assembly and you watch your kids get the Sports Star of the Year, or you watch everyone else's kids get it and you think, what am I doing wrong? Your dad won medals at Commonwealth Games. Like you've got a really strong swimming pedigree in your family. So many parents struggle with knowing how much to push and when to pull back with their kids, especially when it comes to sport. How did your parents get this balance right? Why did this work for you?
I think it was definitely the balance. It was like not pushing me to do a certain thing and not pushing me to achieve a certain level or anything like that. It was purely about enjoyment, especially from that young age, because I think they knew that if there's something that I love and that I enjoy and it's coming from me, then that means the longer that I'll be doing it for. And for them, like, they wanted me to learn how to swim from a young age, and then it was all kind of directed by me and they encouraged that. But it's that fine balance. And then also having the balance then allowed me to be self-determined and have the, self-want to set goals and move ahead and things like that.
So I'm listening to what you're saying and reading between the lines just a little bit. You're talking about encouragement. You're talking about how they allowed you to make these choices. But if I'm understanding you correctly, that would indicate that there was still involvement. It's not like they said, hey, Emma, it's your life, do what you want. It sounds to me like they were involved in conversations with you consistently about what you were doing. What were those conversations like? Because I can imagine, especially, again, having a dad who's got this sort of background, I can imagine him watching you go to a race or showing up to training and seeing you swim in the pool. I mean, he owned a swim school, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
I would imagine that it would have been hard for him to not say, hey, Emma, you need to stretch out more with your right arm, or I want you to work on your bilateral breathing. I can imagine him saying your kick's not quite right. He wants to give you that coaching. How do they tread that line in terms of being involved and being encouraging and yet not going too far, not pushing? That's something that so many parents really struggle with.
Yeah, well, my dad was actually my coach, so he was giving me those tips.
Right, okay.
Yeah, from about, I think I started swimming with him and his squad when I was about 13. So before that, I had other coaches and mini squad coaches and things like that. And then from about 13, I think it was 13, I moved to my dad's squad. And so he was giving me those tips. But for him, it was much harder for him than it was for me to have my dad as my coach, because it was amazing. And I'm so lucky that I have my dad who was my coach, and how he managed it all, because he balanced the father and coach extremely well. And as soon as we left the pool, he's my dad. And at the pool, he is also my dad. So it was very hard for him to balance, I think. But it was more like he knew if there was a goal that I had that I'd set for myself, then he knew this is what you have to do to get there. And then it's up to me to make that happen, and he'll assist that. And then my mum, you know, she was a swimmer as well, so she knew all about swimming, and I guess just knew how to. I think knew my personality, that as soon as I leave the pool, I'm, you know, a normal kid.
As a teenager, I grew up swimming. My parents forced me to do it. I just wanted to go surfing. But I swam at a reasonable level. In fact, one of the guys that I competed against went and won an Olympic gold in a relay. But I was the kid who I didn't set goals at all. I had no interest in setting goals. In fact, my only goal was to get to the other end of the pool so I could jump out and go and spend 10 minutes in the toilet so I didn't have to swim the laps. You've talked about how you're the one that's setting the goals. Did your parents say, do you have any goals? Did they encourage you to set goals? What was that process? Because clearly, if you've got a vision that you're working towards, that's going to help you to be inspired to keep on pushing. So who was in charge of that goal setting, and how much were your parents involved in what you decided?
It was mostly set by me. Like from a young age, I wanted to go to the Olympics and be like the people that I was watching race on television.
Wow.
And so then me saying that, and my parents, I guess, hearing me say that, then they could just encourage what that was, what that goal was. And when you're young, like that's like the big dream. It's not really like a goal, whereas the goals are those shorter term type things. Like I want to make this qualifying time to get to the state championships and things like that. And but yeah, it was mostly driven by me and then encouraged by them.
So here's the follow-up question to that, because my kids will often tell me that they've got a goal. Their goal is to wake up this many days a week at such and such a time and go for a run or go for a swim or do something that's healthy for them physically. Or they've got an academic goal. They want to get a certain grade in a certain subject. And then as a parent, I see them not getting up and not doing the work that's necessary to get the goal. So they express the goal. It's their goal, not mine. And now they're not doing the work for it. Did you ever do that? And if so, how did your parents respond? Did they ever say, hey, Emma, you told us that you wanted to do this and now you're not doing the work. Like, do you want it or do you not want it? Or did they just stand back?
I do it all the time. Like when I was like, you know, still at school and everything, I would not get out of bed. Like often to go to training. But it was always like I had to set my alarm, and like me and my dad and my brother, we were going off to training together 4:45 in the morning. And if you're not downstairs by 10 to 5 when we're leaving, then that means you're not coming. And then I would get the feeling myself of like guilt that I didn't get up because I know I need to and know I want to achieve these things. And then I'd have to sit in that feeling, and then eventually you learn I don't want to have that feeling. So you get up and go. But then my dad being like that, and that you had to set your alarm and be downstairs at that time, that taught me the self-determination. And, you know, you're doing it for you. You're doing it because you want to, and this is what you have to do to get what you want, which is like I've carried that through my whole career and will for my whole life. It's like that self-discipline and accountability and things like that.
You've used the term self-determination a couple of times. The theory that all of my parenting work is based on is called self-determination theory.
Oh.
And it's a profoundly valuable psychological theory that argues that we will have, when we have to be compelled to do something, it's because we're in an environment where our psychological needs are not being supported. But when we are doing things with a high level of commitment, we're doing those things because our psychological needs are being supported. And those needs are, we need to have good relationships with the people with whom we're doing that activity. We need to feel a sense of competence and capability, or at least that we're progressing towards competence. And last, and I think the linchpin to the whole thing is this thing called autonomy. We have to be doing it because we're choosing it rather than because it's being forced upon me. As I listen to your story, here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing Emma McKeon, Australia's most decorated Olympian ever, saying, I liked the people that I was there with because they were my friends and they were my family. I was good at it and knew that I was getting better because I was getting a high quality of instruction, and therefore I was able to measure my progress and see my improvements and my increase in capability, capacity, competence. And ultimately this came down to me. I was the one who was choosing it. It feels like this is at the very core of what your success has been, being in an environment that supports those needs.
supports the needs, and then also supports from the young age. It has to support the enjoyment is the first thing. And then while you are enjoying it, you're learning all these other skills of turning up on time and working hard on your little skills, and you're learning all these other skills that you are then going to need as you get older. But the enjoyment part is the focus when you're young.
Emma, we often hear about the sacrifices that athletes make up and down the pool, staring at that black line hour after hour after hour, but we rarely hear about the joy. What were some of the most enjoyable aspects of your journey to Olympic glory that parents might want to create for their own children in sport?
I mean, it's different from when I was young to when I was older. When I was older, it was having the things that I'll always reflect on is having my family in the stands at the Olympics or World Championships, and knowing they're there, and, you know, they've travelled around the world to watch me and cheer me on and support me, and knowing that whether I do well, whether I don't do well, like, they know whether I'm going to be happy or not with my performance, but they're the same no matter what as well. So that's one of the fun and enjoyable and special parts. And then when I was young, the fun things are, it's the social part, like traveling around to different meets and things with my friends and playing handball and seeing what I can do once I got in for the race, but then got out and I'm, you know, being social and hanging out with my friends.
Those three words, no matter what, are particularly meaningful to me. It's something that I emphasize a lot when I'm talking to parents. I just love that. But I also love, for that younger element, there's a recurring theme in this conversation. That is, my parents didn't push me. And when I wasn't swimming, I was just being a kid having fun with my friends. Like handball, you go to the meet so you can see everyone and play handball, and I've got to go and swim those races. That's the feeling that I'm getting from you.
Definitely, yeah. That's what brought me the enjoyment and kept me going when I was young.
Emma, if you look back at your teenage years and you're swimming there, what would you wish for every young athlete from their coaches and parents? What do you wish that more coaches and parents understood about the children, the adolescents that they're coaching or encouraging to do well?
I think it's from that really young age is not pushing kids too hard, and not in swimming or in other sports, but for swimming as the sport that I know, not making them do kilometres and kilometres of swimming and laps after laps. And I don't think that's healthy from a really young age. It's got to be the enjoyment. You've got to find the love for it, because that's what's going to keep you going for longer. It's got to be, like I was saying earlier, the enjoyment, and then teaching those small, that end up being quite big, skills of paying attention to the little details, or turning up on time, or working well with your teammates and that kind of thing. But the focus has got to be that enjoyment, because kids, well, for me, I know, I hated doing lap after lap after lap when I had to do it. And if I was doing Ks and Ks when I was young, I would not have made it through anywhere close to what I have.
Wow. Your family, as we've already identified, has a really rich swimming heritage. How do you think that influenced your relationship with the sport? And was there ever a time where you just thought, no, I want to get away from swimming because this is what my family is known for and I don't want to do that? Like, was there ever any resistance for you?
There was a little bit, but that kind of came from me. Like, I never felt any pressure because my family was in swimming or anything like that to do it. But different times, like, I guess I thought that I wanted to kind of get away from it a little bit through my teenage years and things. But I think I eventually realised, no, I do love this, and it's such a special thing to be able to do with my family.
I love that you realised that.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, that's the key. Okay, Emma, do you have the mental capacity for a lightning round?
I've just had a coffee, so hopefully that helps.
Oh, I'm so ready for this. You know the deal, a lightning round. First thing that comes into your mind, very short answers. I mean, if you need to elaborate, you can, but looking for the quick, instant response. Question number one. First thing you do when you wake up?
Make a coffee.
Even before a swim?
Yeah.
Most embarrassing pool deck moment?
Maybe diving in and doing butterfly when I'm meant to do freestyle and then switching over.
That would be embarrassing. I presume they disqualify you for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you weren't a swimmer, what sport would you have pursued?
Surfing, I reckon.
Do you shred?
Not now. Never did actually, but I loved it when I was like around 15.
Surfing is my sport.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. Emma McKeon, your favourite post-race meal?
A burger and chips.
Oh, so healthy. That's not what I was expecting at all. Most played song on your warm-up list?
Some Beyonce.
Weirdest superstition that you've adopted before a race?
I don't have any superstitions.
Weirdest superstition you've heard about, and you are welcome to name the athlete.
I've heard about people not wanting to stand on a crack, like in the ground.
Wow, because that's going to slow them down that much.
Yeah.
Amazing. What's a better feeling, breaking a world record or eating pizza after months of training?
Breaking a world record, definitely.
Very good. I'm glad you said that. What's the most unusual place that you've done a workout?
Maybe a hotel room during COVID, we were working out in all kinds of strange places.
Yeah, I'd imagine. What's your go-to karaoke song?
Maybe some ABBA.
Most memorable goggle malfunction moment?
Probably when you just dive in and they just come down to your neck. They've just put some water.
Does that happen often? I mean, there's that legendary story about Michael Phelps' goggles filling up with water, but he counted his strokes and still set a world record. Yeah. Is it a regular thing? I mean, I'm a swimmer, but I never have issues with my goggles. It
can happen. It can happen, but before I will race or before I'll dive in, I'm pressing them so hard on my face to make sure it doesn't happen.
I bet, yeah. Okay, yeah. This is kind of a tricky lightning round question, but I love to ask it. Welcome to take as long as you need to think it through. Best piece of advice that you've ever ignored?
After Tokyo, I continued to race. I took a small break and then tried to keep racing again. And probably I needed to come home and not race because I was so mentally drained and burnt out, and I ignored that and stayed overseas racing.
So the advice was take a breather, let your body recover, and you just said no.
And I didn't do that.
Yeah, interesting. Obviously retirement now, but when you were competing, what was the longest you would go without getting in a pool?
After an Olympics, I'd often take about 3 to 4 months off.
That's a much bigger gap than I expected.
Yeah, that's only once every 4 years or 5 years after Tokyo.
Right. If you could instantly master any skill outside of swimming, what would that be?
Singing.
Huh. How do you
Singing,
go?
Yeah.
How do you go with that?
I can't sing.
Really?
Yeah.
So ABBA at karaoke is wonderfully
Sounds
entertaining.
terrible.
Wonderfully entertaining is the word. Not terrible, just delightfully fun.
Yeah.
2 questions to go. First gold medal or last gold medal? Which one meant more?
The first one, because it's something I dreamt of since I was very little, like 5 years old. And then in Rio, it was on the first night of the swimming, standing on top of the podium. It's just such a surreal experience. And you imagine what it might feel like, but just actually standing there is a whole nother feeling.
Does the feeling of winning gold, setting a world record, does the feeling diminish over time because you have done it so many times, especially compared to most athletes? Do you kind of get to the point where you're like, yep, expected it, yep, did it, box ticked, what's next? Or is it one of those things where you really do sit in that moment every time and think, oh my goodness, fastest ever?
The feeling is just as surreal and just as special every single time. But I would say there's also that element of, okay, what's next? What more can I do? Which is part of being an athlete, or part of my experience as an athlete, always wanting to be better. So that was something I had to juggle, because you need to be able to sit in it and feel proud and all the good feelings.
Let me ask you about your early swimming again, because most parents who are listening to this are going to have kids who are, 12 and younger or 14 and younger who are involved in sport, and quite often kids are having high levels of anxiety before they compete in a race, or before they go out and play a big game, or before they sit down and do an exam. Now, you've spoken about experiencing anxiety before races, mostly big races, which makes sense. When you were younger, did you feel that same sort of pressure? Was there anxiety before you swam when you were a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old?
yeah, I definitely still got nervous when I was young. And that's just because I cared about what I was about to do and didn't know what I might be about to do. And so the nerves are actually the same, whether I was at a state level meet or through to when I eventually was at an Olympic. So nerves are nerves, and that's what it is.
So if a parent's talking to their child and their child's saying, I'm just so nervous and I'm really anxious and I don't know if I can compete or I don't know if I'm going to do any good, what would you say? Like, how did you develop the mental tools to manage those big moments? What advice would you give to any young athletes who are saying, I'm facing all this pressure and I don't know if I can do it?
I think it's reframing it in your head and seeing the nerves as a good thing. The nerves are like little bouts of energy that you can use in your race, and nerves are showing you that you care. Nerves are showing you that you're doing something brave and worthwhile. And I think it's reframing it in more of a positive way.
There's a psychological strategy called self-distancing, and in so many ways you've just described what that is. Okay, a couple more questions, Emma. You've achieved extraordinary success. Everybody knows that. But what I'd like to know is what role failure played in your development.
A huge amount. I think the failure is, and everyone says it, but it's really true, is the failure is what has taught me the most. It's taught me how to get back up again. It's taught me how to pay attention to what can I do better next time. It's given me motivation at times, and it's taught me a lot about myself as well. So, and like managing it and being disappointed, because it's okay to be disappointed when you do fail because you care, and then being able to put it aside and move on forward and try again next time. Missing the London 2012 team for Olympics, I missed that one by like 0.1 of a second. So that was definitely a big factor in my career, because I think had I made that team, the story would have been very different to what it is now. But I missed that team. I ended up stopping swimming. I didn't want to wait another 4 years to go to the Olympics, all of that kind of thing. And then eventually learnt some lessons I had to learn, and then came back into the sport. And, I had to learn about that I had to pay more attention to the small things, and I had to be turning up every session. And like when I was there, I would always work hard, but I had to turn up more often. And then I had to also learn how to deal with the pressure I was putting on myself as well.
Emma, a lot of parents worry about their children becoming too one-dimensional in pursuit of their sporting excellence. Sometimes it's the parents pushing them. Other times, though, it's kids that are really, really focused themselves. What did you do to maintain balance while you're pursuing those goals?
All through teenage years, I was doing a bit of everything. Like, I was setting big goals. And those big goals at that time was, qualifying for a meet or doing a PB or things like that in swimming. But I was doing a bit of everything. I was doing basketball, dancing, whatever I wanted to try. Like, I was doing piano. So there was that balance across a lot of activities. Yeah,
there's so much research that says don't concentrate on one thing too hard too soon. Just do stuff. Experience a range of activity, breadth of activity, and then as you get older, zero in on it. And everything that you've said seems to point in that direction. My final question, if there is a parent who really wants their child to succeed and their child does not seem to have the get up and go that an Emma McKeon clearly demonstrated with that wonderful self-determining approach to life and specifically to your sport, what would you say to that parent?
I think once you've told the kid that to get somewhere you have to work hard at it, once the kid knows that, they have to learn that for themselves. But also maybe they haven't found the thing that they're passionate about to make them want to get up and go yet.
Make it about the child rather than about you.
Yeah.
Emma McKeon, really appreciate your generosity in chatting with me. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you. It was a good chat.
The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. If you like the podcast, can we invite you to take 20 seconds out of your day? It's literally that quick. 20 seconds, leave us a rating and review. We like the 5-star ones the best, by the way. They genuinely help people to find the show and make their family happier. Resources and ideas to help your family thrive are available at happyfamilies.com.au.